Okay, so in January of 1967, I was an 18-year-old college student going to Ellsworth College in Iowa Falls, Iowa. I actually lived in Waterloo, Iowa, which was about 50 miles away, and we would go home on the weekends from school. I didn't have a car at the time, so I relied on these two other guys for a ride back and forth on the weekends to school. One weekend, they picked me up on a Sunday night about 7 o'clock in the evening, presumably to go back to school, but one of the guys, one of my friends there, had to pick up his check. He worked part-time at Kentucky Fried Chicken there in Waterloo. And while we were in there, my two friends were talking to the manager of the Kentucky Fried Chicken, and his name was John Wayne Gacy. He was a 30-some-year-old guy, and they used him to buy their liquor and their beer. Likes to party, and he buys them booze and for free. And one of them even said that he shared his wife one time with one of their other friends. So when we got to the Kentucky Fried Chicken, we all went in, and I was just hanging around the kitchen area while my other two friends were talking to Gacy, and I was looking around, and I see this big vat, and it had blades on the bottom of it, and while I was just kind of looking around, John Gacy came up to me and he said, "Do you know what that machine is?" And I said, "No," and he says, "This is where we make our coleslaw. We put heads of cabbage in there, and those blades at the bottom of there spin so fast that it can almost liquefy it. You got to keep your eye on it." Gacy then told these two friends of mine, he told them that his wife and child were out of town and they were visiting relatives in Chicago. And he invited us all over to his house to drink and to play pool. I really wasn't comfortable with this, but I couldn't make any decisions because I was just a rider. And so we left there and we drove not far away to John Gacy's house. And we went down to the basement there, and right away my two friends proceeded to start drinking. And I wasn't a drinker. So I just went over to the pool table and started playing pool. And as the night went on, pretty soon John Gacy came over to the pool table and he asked if I would mind if he played against me, and I said no. But while we were playing pool, Gacy had these diplomas all around the pool table on the wall, and I was curious about them, and he seemed to me to be a very important man because he was talking about all these diplomas. He said, "Well, you see this diploma here, the Illinois Governor's Board of Sex and Health." He says, "I was involved in a study of homosexuals, and what I did was they committed their acts of homosexual acts, and I would just take notes as to how they were feeling and stuff." And he said they did an extensive study of this in Illinois. And to me, that, you know, I just kind of brushed that off, and we kept playing pool. And the whole time we were playing pool, he was telling me how important he was in the area of Chicago. He knew the Chicago police chief personally, and told me that he opened up a closet there by the pool table that had a bunch of film canisters, and he told me they were all pornographic movies that the Chicago police had confiscated over a period of time, and the police chief would give them to him because he had a particular interest in them, I guess. He was telling me that he was actually some kind of psychologist, and that's what he did. He studied the human brain and human interactions. So as we played pool, the night went on, and my two friends were getting pretty inebriated, and they were telling me that the next night, which was a Monday night, they were going to have a party at the place where these two guys lived. These two friends of mine supposedly told me that, well, Nimmers, that's me, couldn't just stay here at your place and bring you up in the morning. He'd show you how to get to Iowa Falls and then you can just take him home. And I did not want to do that because I didn't know this guy, and quite honestly, I just wanted to get back to school. And so I argued with him and said, I have a 7 o'clock class in the morning, and I don't want to spend the night here. And my two friends, they were getting pretty inebriated by now. They're saying, Nimmers, you know, you skipped that 7 o'clock class more than you make it anyway, which was actually kind of true. And I got to thinking how drunk my friends were getting, and I was really a little worried about driving back in the middle of winter on icy roads. So I agreed to spend the night at Gacy's house, and my two friends left. Gacy and I continued to play pool, and after a while, he had asked me if I wanted to play for money, and he was such a terrible pool player. Of course, I play. Yeah, I would like to play you for money, and we started playing pool for $1 a game. And he never won a game. I won every game, and it was up to 25 or 30 games. He had owed me $25 or $30. After a while, he said, let's just play one game, and we'll play one game of pool for a lot more than what we're playing for now. And I thought, you know, I'm an 18-year-old kid. Well, you want to play, what do you want to play for? It's like $10? And he goes, no, I want to play for something so big that it's obvious you're a very good pool player. But if you put a lot of pressure on you, that if you were to lose, you wouldn't play as good. I mean, if the stakes were pretty high. And so I said, what, like $100 a game or something, which was unheard of then. And he said, no, I want to play you one game of pool for this. He said, if I lose, I have to commit a sexual act on you. And if you lose, you have to commit a sexual act on me. And I told him, no way. I mean, one, I don't want to do a sexual act on you, and I don't want you doing a sexual act on me. And he kind of laughed it off, and then he said, okay, have you ever seen a stag film? Back in those days, they called pornography stag films. And I'd never seen one before. And I said, yes, I would like to see one. And he got a 16mm projector out and set up a screen right there in his basement and put a chair right in front of the screen and turned the lights off, turned the film on, and I was watching a pornographic movie. And he left and he went upstairs. And here I am sitting in the dark by myself watching a pornographic movie I've never seen anything like that before in my life. So as this movie went on, I could hear that he had come back down the stairs and the door opened. You could see the flicker of light as he opened up the door, and I wasn't paying any attention to it. I just knew that he had come back down, and I figured he was standing behind me watching this movie with me. And then all of a sudden, the light came on, and at the same time I heard a click, and I turned around, and there was a pistol pointed right at my head, right in my face now. And he said, and ordered me to stand up, which I did, and he said, now I want you to take your pants down because I'm going to perform a sexual act on you and you're going to perform one on me. All this time he's holding the gun to my head. And I complied and I stood up and I took my pants down. But I was crying and begging him not to do this. And even trying to get him to realize that under these kind of circumstances, nothing could happen sexually with me under these circumstances because I'm so scared, and begging him not to do this. And then he started to laugh and he told me to go over and sit at the bar. So I went over and sat at the bar, and he walked around around the bar, and he put a glass, and he set his gun, a pistol, set it right on the bar. And he poured me a big glass, a tumbler, probably this big, and he filled it full of straight whiskey. and handed that to me or slid it in front of me, and he said, go ahead and drink this. He said, this will calm you down. He was laughing the whole time. He said, what I was doing, he says, I was just testing you. He said, I won't mention their names. He said, your two friends had set you up, and that he had done this to one of my friends too. He said, it's a psychological thing, and he likes to see how he can break someone's will. And he used a lot of psychological terms, which was way over my head, and he just said, what I was doing was just putting you under a lot of strain and a lot of pressure just to see how you would react. While he's talking this psychological mumble-jumble to me, I think he saw me looking at the gun or something, because I was actually thinking at the time, maybe I have an opportunity here. I could grab this gun and I could run up the stairs and run out the house. And it was like he was reading my mind, because he took the gun and he pushed it right in front of me. He said, go ahead, take it. He said, Steve, you have to understand, this was all just a study. It was a joke. And he said, and besides that, if you were to run out of here, he said, what are you going to do? When you go up those stairs, do you remember which way to go? Do you remember to turn left at the top of the stairs, or turn right, or is the door that way, or is the garage door this way? And he says, I would have gotten you anytime before you could get out there. He said, but trust me, he said, this was just a project that I like to do, with putting people under stress, and I was analyzing you the whole time. So I'm really kind of a naive 18-year-old at the time, and I kind of bought that, and I said, well, what did you analyze? He says he was analyzing me the whole time. And I said, well, what did you analyze me about? What was I like? And he said, well, you're a very strong-willed person. And once you make up your mind, you're not going to do it. He says, you're a very admirable person, and a very strong-willed person, and let's just go to bed. We'll get up early in the morning and drive to Iowa Falls. So he took me upstairs and he gave me a bedroom. It was his son's bedroom, had a single bed in there. So I went to bed. I stripped down to my underwear and t-shirt, as I normally do, and crawled into bed. And I don't know how much time elapsed, but I was in that state where you're not quite asleep, but you're a little bit asleep, and all of a sudden I felt a hand on my leg, on my thigh, and it was rubbing my inner thigh up and down. And at the same time I opened my eyes, I saw John Gacy sitting at the side of my bed, and this time he had a knife sticking in this whole part of my throat, touching the skin but not really pushing it in. And he, with this window that was in this bedroom with the light of the street light, I could see beads of sweat on his forehead, and it was a frightening look, because he was, to me at this time, he was a frightening man. And he proceeded to tell me that we were going to commit these sex acts again on each other. And again, I started crying and trying to reason with him that this is a physical impossibility under these circumstances, and I was begging him not to do this. But then I got very bold about it, because I thought, he can't kill me, because my two friends left here at like 11 o'clock at night, and now it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I got real bold with him. I said, you can't kill me anyway. He goes, I said, my two friends left here, and the first thing the police are going to want to know is who was I last with, and they're going to tell them that they left me at your house. And so you can't kill me. And he had, almost like it had been rehearsed, he said, he laughed and he said, oh no. He said, you remember that coleslaw machine I told you about? I showed you up at Kentucky Fried Chicken? He said, I would just simply kill you, bring you up to Kentucky Fried Chicken, put pieces of you into that vat, and turn it on high, and I would just pour you down the drain. And this really put a fright into me, and I just begged him again and cried. And he gave up. Thankfully, he hadn't progressed to the point that he eventually did. And he started to laugh and said, well, I couldn't break you the first time. He says, I was trying to break you again. This was all a joke, and I wasn't buying it at all this time. And he just got up. He was in his underwear, by the way, too. He got up and he said, look, I'm going to bed. I ain't going to bother you anymore. When you want to get up early in the morning, we'll go to Iowa Falls. He left the room then, and that's when I noticed he actually had like 4 or 5 pieces of tape taped to the side of my bed that he forgot to take with him. I did not go to sleep the rest of that night. I waited until, this was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I waited till about 5:30, 6 o'clock, and I went over and banged on his bedroom door. I said, I'm ready to go now, let's go. He got up and asked if I wanted breakfast. Didn't want any breakfast, and it was a good hour's drive. And on the way, he knew I was very upset. And I was still shaking. And he told me that, well, he says, I know you don't believe that this was all a joke. You don't probably believe that, but it is. It's true. It was a joke. There was nothing to this. He said, but just in case, he says, I have a good reputation in this town. I belong to the JCs and all these other organizations, and I know the chief of police here. He said, so that I just don't want you to mention this to anybody else. It was a joke, but I know you don't believe it was, but let me tell you this. If you tell anybody what happened last night, all I have to do is pick up the phone and make one phone call to Chicago, and there will be someone in town to kill you. He said, I hate to, he was trying to be friendly, at the same time threatened to kill me if I had mentioned anything. He said, just don't tell anybody, but it really was a joke. When we got to Iowa Falls, I directed him to the house where these guys lived, and the party was going to be that night, but I did not want him, I just told him to leave me off here in the corner. I did not want him to know where I lived at this boarding house, and I just walked about 8 or 10 blocks away for that. And I was not supposed to tell anybody. I got to my boarding house, I went upstairs, and there was another guy, another student that had a room up there too, and he was there, and he knew that I was shaken, and he asked me what happened, and I had to tell somebody. So I told him, you can't tell anybody. And he said, no, you can trust me. So I told him what had happened. And that night, there was actually a dance up at the Commons area at the school. Knowing that I wasn't going to go to the hole where the party was, I went to the Commons area where they had a dance. And while I was at this dance, another friend of mine came up, and he said, Steve, he says, the police have an all points bulletin out looking for you. Why? He says, I don't know, but they're looking for you. So I assumed that this roommate of mine probably had said something, and in actuality he had. He got scared, and he told the landlord, the little old lady that lived downstairs that we rented from. She in turn got scared and called my mother at home, who in turn called the Waterloo police, who in turn called the Iowa Falls police, and they were looking for me. So with this friend's help, he had a car. We were going to leave the school, and as you walk out of the Commons, there's a stairwell there. You go up to go outside. And as I walked up, I could see out the glass doors, there was John Gacy's car, and he was standing outside, leaning against the hood of the fender of his car. I knew we couldn't go out that door. He must have gotten wind that somebody had told somebody. So we went out another door, and I went to the Iowa Falls police, and they had told me that they had got a call from actually my mother through the Waterloo Police Department. And so I told them the story, And they basically said, you know, this happened in Waterloo, it's a Waterloo police matter, you're gonna have to go through them. And that was it. That was my night with John Gacy, except about a year later, a year and a half later, I was a Marine serving in Vietnam. And I got a letter from my mother. And in this letter was a newspaper clipping that John Gacy had been arrested in Waterloo, Iowa for, and was charged with sodomy and hiring someone to kill another young man. And he was arrested and sent to prison for that in Iowa. I didn't testify in his trial, but I gave deposition. They decided not to use me. I was a detective with the Waterloo Police Department, and in my career worked 67 homicides.